All right, Steeler fans, it is Friday, the second half of the podcast, which means it's time for the All Betz Are Off segment with Jerome Betz. What's up, Jeremy? How's it going?
It's going good, Jeff. We're doing all right, and things are moving on forward towards the draft. It's a lot of fun.
Absolutely. We're, I think, less than 3 weeks away now. It's exciting, and
Yep.
mock drafts are going crazy. When you see a mock draft, because your mock draft is going to run today, Friday, and I'll give
Right.
you an opportunity to plug that. But in terms of mock drafts, like, do you ever look at them and just say, man, like that's really lazy? Like the way that they do things. I'll give you an example. Field Yates. I actually like Field Yates. I think he does a
Yeah.
good job. He put out a 2-round mock draft. I covered this for SteelCurveNetwork.com, and somehow Jackson Dart fell to 21 and the Steelers took him.
Yeah.
I feel like that's really lazy. Before we talk about that specific scenario, what are your thoughts on people that do mock drafts?
Yeah. I mean, you have to go into it with a point and a purpose. And I think it needs to be clearly stated. So, like this one that I'm doing, right? This is a wild. Like if the Steelers went completely crazy and they said we're revamping this whole thing, we want a lot of picks this year. We found these partners to make deals with. This is what we would like to do, and there's some realism to it, obviously, because of where the players are being picked. But you want to be upfront and honest with it. Like, I'm not saying this is what they will do. I'm not saying this is what they should do. I'm being clear that this is coming from me, right? This is a what if the Steelers went about this route. So exploring scenarios is what mock drafts are all about. I think that at this stage in the draft process, that's all it really is. You're exploring scenarios. Nobody has really any solid intel on what teams are going to do outside of maybe the first couple picks in the draft, where you start to see some rumors circulate. But at this stage, when you're looking at mock drafts, just be aware this is a scenario based thing, and also consider that the team that you root for, you're going to have a better idea of the intricacies of how they do their processes and how they attack the draft and what their needs are than a national analyst is going to do, looking at the broader scope and picture of things. And when those guys look at the Pittsburgh Steelers, they think they don't have a quarterback on the roster. That's what they need. And so they're adding those guys in the first round.
So what do you think about a scenario where Jackson Dart's there at 21? That just feels Kenny Pickett-esque to me if they did that. What's your take?
So to me, it doesn't even feel Kenny Pickett-esque, because at that point you had a guy in place that you were like, okay, Mitch Trubisky can be our bridge this year. We feel good about that. So let's go ahead and add at the biggest need that we have at quarterback for a guy that we did not think was going to be there. And in the Jackson Dart case, this is a guy that should go in the second round. There's no reason for him to go on day one other than you're desperate. And so if you're Pittsburgh and you take Jackson Dart at 21, that's a sign of desperation. And in my opinion, a different story than why they went after Kenny Pickett in 2022. This is or was that 2021? I can't even remember now.
2022.
Okay. Yeah. So a little bit different scenario, but the vibe of bringing in the incomplete quarterback that we're just not sure how he's going to fit into our system anyway. I think the Steelers have made it very clear in how they've talked that if it's not Aaron Rodgers, it's Mason Rudolph, another veteran, and a mid-round rookie, but it's not going to be that first-round rookie.
All right, so I gave you homework again. It was last-second homework. And so last week I gave you a specific question about what if they traded up, who's the generational talent. This week, though, if you're a Steeler fan and you're listening to our podcast, the Steel Curtain Network, you've heard a lot of the same positional talk: defensive line, quarterback, running back, wide receiver. And part of me is like, yeah, I'm so sick of hearing about like the same position. So, Jeremy, I tasked you with, if there was a position, let's think outside the box. What is a position that you could see the Steelers targeting in round one that not many people are talking about this position?
Well, I'm going to start somewhere that the Steelers have shown some interest in prospects, and has not been in the discussion for the first round pick. And that's the safety position.
Okay.
And when I look at that position group and how the Steelers have gone about their business this offseason, looking at these guys. There was a clip of the Steelers' new defensive backs coach spending, I think they said it was a couple hours with Nick Emenwari after his pro day, the South Carolina safety that had everybody's heads reeling after his incredible combine performance. And then you've got guys like Malachi Starks out of Georgia who are more versatile pieces. He's kind of more like a Brian Branch in Detroit, if you will, where he can play up at the nickel spot, but he can also play in the box as a safety covering tight ends, or he can jump back into coverage as a safety in the center of field. So he's a little bit more versatile. Nick Emenwari is more of that big, strong box safety, a traditional strong safety that stuffs the run and covers tight ends and running backs out of the backfield, that kind of thing. But then they also went to the pro day at Texas. Everybody was there, all the big names, Mike Tomlin, Omar Khan, and they spent a lot of quality time with Xavier Watts, one of the other top safeties in this class, and he's more of a Minkah Fitzpatrick center fielder type. So there's a group of guys at the top of this draft class that have very interesting skill sets that if you're looking outside of the box for that non-defensive tackle, it's not a wide receiver, not even a running back, because there's been some conversation about that. I think, to me, the next logical place is safety. And if Nick Emenwari or Malachi Starks are there at 21, that makes a ton of sense to me. And if you wanted to trade back, somebody's wanting to come up for a wide receiver or something like that, you might be able to sneak in as Xavier Watts at the back end of the first round and feel okay about that, even though he's probably more of an early day 2 prospect. That would be the position that comes first to mind for me. Corner's another one where if the right guy falls, say Will Johnson is hanging around there at 18, 19, 20, and you're thinking maybe this guy gets to you, he's a guy where I think you would run up the card if you're Pittsburgh because of the value that represents and the type of player that he is. And then the other one is Jahdae Barron out of Texas, another Texas guy that the Steelers were at the pro day for and invited to dinner. If he's there around 21, he's got a pretty wide range of areas where he goes. Guys like Dane Brugler at the Athletic have him squarely in the second round, while guys like Daniel Jeremiah have him as like a top 10 prospect in this draft. So he could go any number of areas. He's kind of an inside outside guy. That would be the next position on the list for me.
Yeah, I saw it. I can't remember someone's mock draft. It was ESPN. They had the Steelers taking a Florida State corner. I forget his name in the first round. And well, of course, the fans were just like,
"This Thomas
this guy's not fast enough. He's not fluid enough. This is a horrible pick." I'm like, oh gosh, here we go. So let me ask you this follow-up question. You said safety was your number one answer. If there was a defensive lineman that the Steelers liked, maybe not maybe not the number one potential option, because a lot of people would say, well, what would you do? You got to know what happens ahead of you. Like, how does it play out? How many quarterbacks go in the top 10, top 15, and what does that do to the rest of the talent? So in this regard, let's say there's a second tier defensive lineman who still could be worthy of a first round draft pick, but then you have one of these top safeties. Is there a safety that in your mind, as not just a Steeler fan, but as someone that analyzes these scenarios and these players, that you could say, I could see them taking this safety over the defensive lineman?
Yeah, that guy to me would be Emenwari, just because he's the one with the elite traits. When you're talking about, I always like to clarify, when I'm talking about generational players in a draft, I try to avoid the label of generational player, right? So I like to say generational prospect or generational talent. Nick Emenwari is a generational athlete at the safety spot. 6'3", 215 pounds, runs like he does, jumps like he does. That's elite athleticism that you don't hardly ever see. And if that can translate to the NFL, then that's something that you jump on, in my opinion. But if I'm the Pittsburgh Steelers and say Walter Nolan is the only defensive tackle that I've got a first round projection on, and he's probably the third or fourth defensive tackle in the draft. Well, sorry, fourth or fifth, because I keep leaving out Mason Graham because I'm locking him as a top 5 pick. And so Derek Harmon, Kenneth Grant, Walter Nolan, and Tyleik Williams out of Ohio State, those are kind of the next tier guys. If Walter Nolan or Tyleik Williams are there at 21 and they're the only defensive tackles left, but Nick Emmanwori sitting there, I think you go with the safety because of the upside there, and you try to attack defensive tackle on day 2 where the depth is still good. You might get 95% of one of those second tier first round guys in the 3rd round.
It's interesting when you throw out the cornerbacks, safeties, and you put them in the mix. You run out of draft picks really quick. And that's the thing. Like, the Steelers do not have a full allotment of picks because they got rid of their 2nd round draft pick. Now, let's just stick with the safety talk for a second. What any number of safeties that you just brought up, if they were to draft them, how do you think they would fit, assuming that Minkah Fitzpatrick remains on the roster? How do you see them fitting into what the Steelers like to do on defense?
So let's start at the top with Emmanwori, who I think is the number 1 safety in the class. If he's on the team, he's kind of your immediate dime backer. And then he's going to rotate in 3 safety packages and kind of be the heir apparent, if you want to say it that way, to Deshaun Elliott. Like, Deshaun Elliott, his contract's up after this year, I believe. So he would be kind of the next guy in line for that spot. He's not going to ever be really your center fielder. I don't think you can put him there in a pinch because he's got the range and everything, but you would be limiting what he can do with his size and his closing speed. If he's not somewhere around the line of scrimmage, kind of like what the Ravens do with Kyle Hamilton.
Right.
So that's kind of where I fall with that. If you're going Malachi Starks, this is a guy who could start at nickel corner for you for a lot of the year. He could jump in and play in the slot a lot for you right away. He would be your DeMonte Casey right away, like your 3rd safety that plays a lot of snaps in sub package football. And then he could maybe transition into the deep center fielder if you wanted to work him into that type of role. But I think you want to play to his versatility a little bit more. And then the 3rd guy, Watts, he's the guy that I look back and say, this is a 1-for-1 to Minkah Fitzpatrick. I'm not saying he's as good as Minkah is or was a couple years ago, whatever, but he's that ball hawking safety, likes to come up and play robber, likes to drop back and be the deepest man in coverage, eliminates the downfield threat. He's that guy in this draft. He's the premier one of those types in this draft. So if I'm looking at those 3 guys, that's how they would fit with the Steelers, in my opinion. And I trust, more than anything, I trust Mike Tomlin and Terrell Austin to figure things out on the secondary. They've shown that they can do that and be viable back there with whatever guys that they have. So a versatile guy that has that type of upside could really assist in making that unit elite.
I think this has been very valuable because a lot of fans, they just assume it's going to be defensive line, it's going to be quarterback, maybe it's going to be running back, it's going to be wide receiver. Sometimes you have to think, like, what are the Steelers thinking in terms of across the board? Hell, you could even throw in the offensive line. And if it's a situation where an offensive tackle or even an offensive guard, you don't know what's going to happen. I always go back to like the David DeCastro scenario. He was not supposed to be available. And yet when he fell to the Steelers, like, you can't not take this guy. There are players like that at other positions. I think that's worth noting. Any final thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think that what you're noting is important because the Steelers have, like you said, they have more needs than they have picks in this draft. So it makes sense to me that their approach in this class would be, okay, what is our top priority? Let's add that in the 1st round. And then after that, it's whoever falls to us. It's whoever shouldn't be there that's there at one of those remaining positions, safety, corner, running back, the litany of other secondary needs, if you will. Quarterback, who shouldn't be here, that is here. Is Jalen Milroe here at our pick in round 3? Or is that Caleb Johnson, who they just had in for a visit at running back? Who was supposed to be gone here that we can't afford to pass up, even though maybe we have a little bit bigger hole at such and such spot. We have enough holes where we just need best player available.
Yeah, that's very good. It's a good message for everyone out there listening or watching. So I want to give you an opportunity to let everyone know the top 30 visits. We've had some more names been brought up. Yesterday, Thursday, the Steelers reportedly hosted several of these players. I'll give you the floor so you can run them down.
Yeah, let's just rapid fire these guys. now I'm going to blank on their names. Matthew Golden, wide receiver out of Texas, is the first one. He's the one that's hit the triumvirate here. The Mike Tomlin and Omar Khan went to his pro day. He's come in for a top 30 visit. So he's got both the top dogs and then that top 30 visit coming in. That's very interesting to me. Wide receiver has jumped up in my list of options for the Steelers in round one, going back to that conversation a little bit. And then they brought in Azariah Thomas, the corner out of FSU that you saw mocked to the Steelers in the first round. He's an early day 2 pick, so it'd be a little bit of a reach, but it would, if they traded back, it would make sense more to go after a guy like that there. He's just a long press corner, much in the mold of a Joey Porter Jr. or a Corey Trice. He kind of fits that realm that the Steelers have been attacking recently. The third guy, the local visit was Gavin Bartholomew, a tight end out of Pitt. He's an interesting blocking tight end with some usage as a receiving threat on seam routes and things like that. Let's see, they brought in a defensive tackle, Joshua Farmer, out of Florida State for a visit. He's kind of a day 2 pick. And then there's one other guy who I'm blanking on right now.
Caleb Johnson.
Yes, Caleb Johnson. I'm sorry, I just mentioned him earlier. The running back out of Iowa. Jeff, this is my 3rd ranked running back in the draft. He's the best fit overall for Pittsburgh's scheme under Arthur Smith. He's the best wide zone runner in the class, and I don't think it's even close outside of Ashton Genty, who's in a realm all to his own. But if the Steelers were looking for somebody that they would want to go up and get on day 2, maybe jump back into the 2nd round to go get, or if somehow he fell into the 3rd and you're like, this is the guy we want, he fits so perfectly with what they want. 6'1", 225 pounds, plenty of speed. Actually, he ran a 4.58, I think, which is a lot faster than Najee Harris. So he would be a good fit for the Steelers.
All right, good stuff. And make sure you check out all of the articles that Jeremy's doing on these pre-draft visits, as well as the tracker that I update once he does those articles, steelcurtainnetwork.com. Jeremy, I want to give you an opportunity to plug not just the Fix, which was a good episode this week. It ran a day earlier due to scheduling conflicts, and then also the Draft Dynasty podcast and any articles you have coming up.
Yeah, so the Fix was a lot of fun. We talked about guys who play like Steelers. And so if you want to see who this draft has to offer that look and play and feel like Steeler-type prospects, go listen to that show. The Draft Dynasty podcast, we've got a list of shows that we're going to do in the lead-up to the draft, breaking down the final thoughts on each of these prospects. So stay tuned for that one to ran this morning as well on the FFSN NFL feed, wherever you get your podcast. And then follow me on X at the Betz93, THEBETZ93. I post all of my articles and podcasts on that as well.
All right, Jeremy, love it as always. Enjoy the rest of your week, and we'll talk next week. Take it easy.
Have a good one, Jeff.